Welcome, Simon, to Metalarium Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you again because we spoke in
Thank
the
you so
past for
much.
your previous album, Never. Cheers with you for your last album, Never Enough Snuff at that moment, and now we
Yeah.
spoke 4 years later about Sins of the Father. So we're starting by asking, so how are you doing today? How's the band during the last 4 years? Because the previous album released 4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, Never Enough Snuff was our first in 20 years. So it actually feels like a pretty quick turnaround having another album in 4 years' time. Um, but yeah, it's been a pretty amazing journey for us. I suppose around the time of the release of Never Enough Snuff. As I said, yeah, 20 years in between that and Dead Speak. And as soon as it got released, we went straight into fucking COVID lockdowns, which, if you didn't know, yeah, was in Melbourne was just horrific. I mean, we spent almost a year locked up. So although it was sort of like a shitty timing for the release of the album, it was actually not such a bad time. In there was a lot of like people home bored, a lot of eyes on screen. So sales did okay. Sins of the Father, our guitarist Matt wrote during lockdown, and Dave put drums to that pretty fast thereafter. But then it was a really long time after that with getting it over the line. Unfortunately, we lost our guitarist Tim that had been with us for 30 years. So yeah, without going into a whole lot of detail there, that was a major fuck around. So yeah, it's been quite the journey in actually getting this release over the line. So yeah, it's been massive. Yep.
Okay. So when did you start writing songs for these scenes of the father? It was at the time to release perhaps your previous album, or perhaps during these last 2 years. So when do you start to write songs? And all the songs are new, or perhaps do you compose everything now?
Uh,
Now, new.
everything's pretty much new. So as I said, it was like what Matt did in lockdown because there's nothing else to fucking do. So it's like, hey, let's write a new album. So he did 9 of the 10 tracks, and then the fifth track, which is called Last Right, was actually from our bass player Rob, and he wrote that one. Ooh, fuck, it was like quite some time ago, but then reworked it for the release of coming into Sins of the Father. And lyric wise, everything's brand new. Yeah, I didn't like rework anything, or I mean, there's a couple of songs that are uh I suppose follow ups to previous Abramelin songs, but
Mhm.
outside of that, all the materials are all brand new.
Mhm. Okay. So now, how do you feel about this new release compared to your previous one, which came out during the difficult time, during the pandemic?
Yeah. Look, I think always like, well, not always, but a lot of the time with bands too, when it comes to that time of doing a new release, because you've just done it and it's fresh and everything else, you're super proud of your new ones. But that all being said, I'm out. I'm lost for words. I'm amazingly proud of Sins of the Father, like with the way it's come out. Uh, the sound of it, the tracks themselves, the just the fucking ferocious energy that we've got behind it as a band, and my part in it as art director for all of the artwork on it. I'm really chuffed with how that came out. So yeah, pretty stoked. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now talking about one thing that captured my attention about these Sings of the Father is the cover art, because you
Mm.
release first the cover art with a different cover art. Then,
Yeah.
according to Hammerheart, you release are releasing this new album, and you release the full cover art. So, why do you decide to release first a cover art with the woman there, and now you release the weeks later the label, and you release full cover art? So there is something with related with the marketing. Who knows?
It's actually the same. So if you buy the CD, you get both covers, and
Mhm.
if you buy the limited edition album of the vinyl, you get both. But the other standalone LP is just the secondary one. So the reasoning behind that, we did the same thing when we released Never Enough Snuff because the artwork on the inside was so graphic. We didn't think we would be able to get that out to retail. So we thought, let's put a slightly more uh, sedate cover
Mhm.
out there, and also for digital and everything else too. Like generally, like what we pop out on the web because it was just a bit too much. And then I thought I'd carry on with that idea with the release of Sins of the Father. So the first, that's my daughter on the album cover, by the way,
Oh, okay.
or in makeup as the demon. So yeah, the first one with her inside the confessional box, playing with the inside of the neck of the priest's head. That's the main cover that we've released for digital, and everything else that got, and I suppose for merchandise and everything. That's the main image that we want people to see. Whereas the other one with her, yeah, fucking the priest in the heart with the inverted crucifix. That's the that's the cover that's on the LP, and also when you take the slipcase off the CD, that's the image that you'll see. Yeah,
Oh,
so that's
okay.
why we worked with two, and because we went to so much effort to bring the artwork together. So there's 8 people involved in bringing that artwork together. So myself as art director, special effects team, makeup artists, 2 photographers, the actors involved, and last but not least, Sally, who's our designer, who has worked on all of our album covers. She put in countless hours into this one in really making it pop and all come together. So yeah, it's been months in the making, that album artwork. I know people look and go, oh wow, fucking sick cover, man. It's just like, man, you got no idea how much work went into this thing. So yeah, I was super happy with it.
Mm. Okay, okay. So talking about now, especially for this new album, as you said, there's now Matt working, Mark Wilcock working from since the previous album on the composition of the last album. Now you have both brothers Haley, David and Joe Haley working for this new album, and also as
Yeah.
a live musician. So how was working for with Matt, and perhaps some songs of this new album has the influence from Tim Eldridge, the last guitars from Abramelin.
Mm. Yeah, look, I mean, Matt played guitar with us originally all the way back on the Dead Speak tour in 2000, 2001. He originally joined the band. So he was with us for, I suppose, a couple of years there before we took our break. And then he went off to the UK and, of course, continued his metal career over there. It just so happened at the time in 2016 when we got the band back together that Matt was just coming back to town. Dave joined us on drums at that time, which just changed everything. Rob, who was originally our engineer and then was our guitarist and then is now our bass player, is basically the glue that who brought us all back together. So yes, I think Matt, with the writing, while trying to stick with the original flavor of Abramelin, brought his own, flavor and style and intensity to the music, which I think is something that we really needed. I mean, we've always been, very much old school death metal. I think we still are, but having the influence of, I'd say, Matt and Dave in particular too, who were both, such prolific musicians in the scene and so well versed with modern death metal. That's definitely had a big impact on our sound. And then, of course, having Joe on board now too. So he mixed and mastered the album for us. And then, yeah, when, Tim left, it was like, oh my God, who are we going to get? And Dave's just like, oh, I'll ask Joe. And Joe's like, yeah, all right. And we're just like, fuck, awesome. So, yeah, we're really happy with the lineup now. Yeah.
Okay, amazing, amazing, amazing. And one thing about now, as you are the last member or one of the original members from the band, since you call Acheron, because Tim and
Yeah.
you were the last members of the band, but now
Yeah.
you are one of the last members. So, do
Yeah.
you think you are the gatekeeper of the sound of Romelin? Because I hear completely all albums. I was there when I hear for the first time your self-titled album Abramelin in
Yeah.
1995. I hear all albums since the beginning to now, and you still sound like Abramelin. That's a one thing
Yeah.
that nobody sounds like you. So, do you think
Yeah.
you are the gatekeeper of the sound of the band since the 90s to now?
No. You know why? Because I'm a vocalist and I write the lyrics and I'm art director and all that sort of stuff when it comes to the music. I leave that to the boys. I think even though Tim's no longer there, as I said before, it's just like what we have, what we've always played. I think that just the band itself, like us as a group, is what hangs on to that sound. We understand, like, what our fans like and also what we enjoy doing. And yeah, that's very much what we hang on to. Lyrically, I haven't changed really anything from the start. It's always just horrible, blood and guts, score laden goodness, which I do so enjoy writing and reading about and watching and everything. So, that hasn't really changed. But yeah, musically, it does come down to the lads, and but then I suppose collectively what we bring together as a as a team. So yeah, it's not about me, that part. That's them. Yeah.
Okay. Other detail I remember to ask you about 4 years ago. It's about the compilation that Century Media did, Transgression of the Afterlife, the complete recordings
Mm.
about the moment. I remember very well. So now, why do you? So in this case, the when you reunite in 2016 after this compilation happened by Century Media, will you
Yeah.
receive some offer from Century Media to release a new album at that moment? Or these new two albums under that label?
Um, when that happened, so I was very well, not was, am good friends with Eula Garrett, who I I used to work many years ago for a record distribution company here in Australia, and I was brand manager for Century Media Records for a number of years. So Eula and I became really good friends. At that time, just prior to the release of the Transgressing Afterlife compilation, um, our albums were selling for stupid money online. Like I think it was the Dead Speak album was selling for like 200 US or something, and the self-titled for it was fucking silly money. So I think Eula went to the Philip at Century Media and the other guys and said, hey, we should look at doing a compilation of the everything these guys have ever put out to capitalize on that. So they did. I think when we got to when we recorded Never Enough Snuff, we approached Century Media, but I, from memory, I don't think they were interested at the time. Their roster was pretty loaded, and yeah, it wasn't really their thing. I think the compilation did really well. Like it sold out from my understanding. So I don't think that was the reason. I think they were just like pretty loaded. So, and of course now we're with Hammerheart Records, which is just awesome. Those guys have been amazing. So yeah, we're pretty chuffed with them. So I think even if something else did come up, we'll probably be sticking around with Hammerheart now because they've just like they've they're the guys who have really believed in us for this release and also for Snuff as well too, and have been supporting us. So yeah, I'm pretty loyal like that. So Hammerheart it is.
Okay, good to know. And other details were yours. How was your enter through Hammerhead Records? Because as you said, never enough. Well, I remember that never enough snuffed. It was released
Yeah,
independently by you. I
it
purchased. I
was.
purchased you the CD, and the CD arrived here 8 months later because the pandemic.
Go the post.
8 months
That's
later.
fucking terrible.
Yes, yes. Yes, well,
Mm,
and now with that album, the sub label of Hammerhead Records support that CD, support that release with Predator. Now you are with
yeah,
Hammerhead with the big label. So
yeah.
how was your entry to Hammerhead since the previous albums to now?
Yeah, well, Petrichor doesn't exist anymore, so that
Hmm.
got sort of, I suppose, yeah, as you said, it was a sub-label of Hammerheart, and I'm assuming since that dissolved, they just sort of swallowed the label into themselves. Um, so yeah, they were most helpful getting Snuff out to the rest of the world outside of Australia. So before we had even finished recording Sins of the Father, we approached Hammerheart and said, look, we've got a new album coming out. Are you guys interested? And Guido's just like, fuck yeah, you're on. They didn't even hear one song. They didn't see any artwork. They didn't anything. And they're just like, yep, we're on. And we're like, come on. So that's what I'm talking about. Like, with them supporting us right there from the start before they even heard one track. It was just like, wow, these guys have got our back already. So yeah, we'll definitely be, sticking around, and that's essentially how that all happened. I think Snuff did pretty well overseas. That they saw that they could definitely capitalize on Sin. So here we go, and I think it's tomorrow for you is when they'll be releasing Sins of the Father,
Yeah.
or released in Australia today. Tomorrow for the rest of the world. So yeah, via Hammerheart and of course Napalm in the US for the rest of the world as of tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, that is right. Tomorrow for us will be tomorrow, but for you right now, you are on the release day
Yeah,
of the album.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Look at us in
yeah,
the future and shit.
yeah. That is right. So now talking about now one thing that how do you feel the reception of your fans and the press to this new album has been so far? So what have the reviews been like? Do you usually read reviews or criticism that are uploaded online? How do you take it?
Yeah, look, it's I have to say it's all been pretty fantastic so far. I everything's just been 8, 9 out of 10. It's been glowing reviews all round. Now that we've actually ship stocked out to people in Australia too, it's like it's just flooding us on socials of everyone, holding up their albums and talking about, how it's their like favorite metal album of the year already, and things like that. So we're all pretty warm and fuzzy over the over the reception of it all so far. I must say I haven't really seen any negative criticism yet for it. And I mean, if look, not everything's going to appeal to everyone, and I totally get that. I did see one or two reviews who were like, not really happy with the production on this one. I think the production on this one's great. I think we've got like a nice, more even sound than we had on Snuff. Snuff, I thought the vocals were too loud, like you couldn't really hear the bass. It was just, how it is. Like you release an album at the time and you're like, yay, and then you listen to back on it later and you're like, could have been better, could have done this, could have done that. I mean, it is what it is at the time, and that's what's captured. So that's fine also too. But yeah, look, I'm really really happy with the way that this has come out. Sorry, and yeah, the overall reception, both domestically and internationally, has been fantastic. So yeah, we're pretty chuffed. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, okay, okay. So one thing that always captured my attention is that Abramelin is, I think, with the more well-known band in Australia since the 90s. Because when you mentioned it, Australia in the 90s, I remember said Mortification, I remember You and Misery, the three bands that I always remember. All people know that they lived there in that moment. Remember,
Yeah.
hey, a band's from Australia, Abramelin, Mortification and Misery, the great death metal bands. Okay, either way, but for other bands. So in this case, so I saw that you are playing with a new child, with the new people like Matt, David, Joy. There's a new way. There's a young blood into the Abramelin sound. So and all these
Mm.
kind of bands, all these musicians are very occupied with their own projects because David and Joe has a lot of gigs, tours with Psychroptic. Then David has no. They play with a lot of bands. With a lot of bands, Pestilence. I don't know. It's they're still playing with
Well,
more
he's got
bands.
yeah. I mean, Matt and Dave have also got werewolves as well too,
Yeah,
which keeps them pretty busy. So yeah, and then Dave, of course, Psychroptic for him and Joe. Dave also too with Ruins. Rob, as well as Abramelin, has got Butterfly, which is his other band. Plus, Rob and Dave are both tour promoters as well. So yeah, I'm like probably the least active musically in the band because I'm like just a Bremelin, but the other guys are like fucking super busy with all of their projects all of the time. But it's like Rob's almost as old as me. I suppose the other guys are about a decade younger, but have still been in the scene for a very long time. So although they do, bring a breath of fresh air and a new blood to the band, that they've definitely earned their stripes in the Aussie scene over the years.
Okay, okay. So, and into this topic, one of the details that always caught my attention is that Abramelin never had a full tour in Europe, or because your name is very well known, thanks to Repulse
Mm.
Records, is very well known in all whole Europe. And in South America, you have also a great fans here. One of them, I'm here. So for this, why always the band never had a full tour in Europe, in US, or South America?
Yeah, look, that's I suppose a bit of a two-part thing. A, because were never really widely released outside of Australia. It was always very much like what was happening here. Um, it's also, I suppose, part of the fact that for me it was always a bit of a hobby thing rather than sort of like a full-time, really throwing myself into it. I never really had the desire to head off internationally. But that being said, yeah, the guys at Hammerheart are in conversations with us, to see if they can get us over to Europe in 2025. So watch this space. We'll see what comes of that. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So, talking about the promotion of this new album, what kind of plans do you have for these Sins of the Father? I saw that you will embark on tours next month with Pestilence and other bands.
Mm,
So,
mm.
apart of that, what kind of plans do you have? Perhaps you will embark tours. You mentioned that you will do a tour in Europe next year. Perhaps you will come to US, South America. Who knows?
Yeah, unsure at this point in time. I mean, it's like got five guys to in the mix to work out, three of which are dads. Two of those dads have both got young families, very young. So I suppose it's a bit of a balancing act to see, like, what we can bring together. Also, I mean, most of us have got our own businesses, and there's a lot of stuff to think about for us to head overseas. But I think doing something for, like, we've had discussions with it and said, well, what about we just go and do something for 2 3 weeks? And it's just like, yeah, that's achievable. That's something I think we could all pull together. So domestically, as you said, yeah, we've got the Pestilence tour coming up at the start of November, and that's the first time they've been to Australia. So that's a pretty big deal. That'll also be our official album launch for the East Coast. We'll be doing some other independent shows in other states outside of that. And then just still like writing the whole, promo thing in the meantime, I suppose, for the next month or so around the release of Sins of the Father. And yeah, we'll just keep comms up with the international team and see what we can make happen next year as far as getting our asses over there finally.
Oh, okay. So, as a veteran band, so what inspired you to create new music and bet on the re-releases in a digital age where there have hundreds of bands releasing albums every weekend? As you know, it's pretty
Yeah.
impossible to catch of releases per weekend. It's impossible. Even we are a media, and for us, it's
Yeah.
impossible to catch up or do reviews for 50 or 60 releases per weekend. That's impossible for us. So now, how do you like to feel to have to compete with many bands nowadays?
Look, of course you are. I think as you said, in a digital age, I think it's crazy how prolific the scene is now compared to what it used to be back in the early days of us doing releases. But I mean, I think that goes across all genres, like can you imagine if you were a DJ working in the electronic music industry, like that's out of control. But I think it goes the same for, like, rock bands and everything else too. Like, everyone's just pumping stuff out so fast, and it doesn't necessarily have to go via labels the way that it did back in the day. Like, people can just self-release and easily get stuff onto digital platforms and run their own promo and everything now. So yeah, look, I suppose for us, as you said, being veterans and everything too, we hang our hat a little more on the fact that we have been around for, what is it, 36 years now. So there is, like, quite a few people out there who know our name, and because they're like, we're so I mean, we've been around that long, and this is only our fourth full-length album, which is sort of embarrassing, but just, is what it is.
Mm.
So because it is also, such a long time in between releases too, that I would like to think that people look at it and go like, oh wow, they've got a new album out. I remember that name from decades ago, and let's check it out. And hopefully with the with the album artwork too being so punchy the way it is too, that I'd like to think that people who are into death metal and horror would look at that and just go, wow, that looks intense.
Mm.
Let's check that shit out. So pick up a few new people along the way, as well as re-spark the interest of old fans from you know, decades ago.
Okay, okay, yeah, well, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, if someone who just discovers you sees that the origins go back to 1988, since your first name Akron at that moment,
Mm,
they would
yeah.
they would think that you sorry, so that you play classic, perhaps thrash metal, thrash or speed metal, because at that moment it was the era of thrash metal, it was the era of the final or the hard rock at that moment.
Mm,
So, but not your case in this point. So the band sounds is modern and includes sounds of different styles into the metal because you have musicians with a new blood, as I said early. So
mm.
in this topic, so what is the reason for your musical evolution and how do you define your sound when they ask you?
Um, Look, the I suppose with the evolution of us was always to I mean, I was like involved in underground audio tape trading back in the late '80s, and just fell in love with death metal at that time. Especially the European death metal sound was just piqued my interest straight off the bat. What was happening in Sweden and Finland, and the sounds that were coming out from there was just like it's so heavy and something I'd never heard before. I was like, wow, I just want to do that, and nothing has changed there. That's I still just like, wow, love that sound, love the heaviness of it and the brutality, and giving me the opportunity to unleash my art lyrically and also like graphically as well too, which is for my love of horror. It absolutely just ticks all the boxes for me. As far as like the progression from like what we did from that very first demo back in the '80s compared to like what we do now, I think that's just been a natural evolution of the band, an evolution of the genre. And also just the fact that like we've had like as we've gone, we've just picked up better musos along the way. I mean, what wanting to do death metal back in the late '80s, like there wasn't really even hardly any drummers in Melbourne that could,
Mm.
punch out grind. It just wasn't a thing because it didn't exist. So trying to get people to play to a style of something that just doesn't even exist is like not easy. Like some people don't understand a thrash beat and it's just like, no, I want you to do this with double kicks. And they're like, well, what? You can't physically do that. So that had its own challenges back then. But yeah, I think over the decades, as the general musicianship of people in metal has picked up, and not to say there wasn't some fantastic musicians like kicking around back then, but I think it's just you've got more availability of said awesome musicians now than you had back then. And then of course, as always with bands too, just finding the right people that really that are easy to work with and gel with the band and have the same philosophies and you know everything that goes with fucking wanting to do the ideal thing with death metal, because it's, as a lot of bands will testify too, it's not easy to work with four, three, four other guys and pull together something that and all have the same vision, but we all do, and we all get along really really well when we're together. When we rehearse, we go on tour together, we just laugh the entire time and just tell old stories and just fucking crack each other up the whole time. And it's a really nice metal family we've got together.
Okay, 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 okay. We are very close to this interview, Simon. And for this topic, one thing that I want to ask you all the time is because you were there, as you mentioned, that you were when you tried to play death metal in Australia, and nobody wants to play the metal because there's impossible at that moment for the drummers, for the guitars. I don't, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
So now, but usually at that moment, all the scenes rise up in the 90s when you appears all you the Swedish scene, the Brazilian scene, etc., the Finland scene, and also the Australian scene at that moment has like a personal sound because Abramelin does not sound like the US, no sound like Europe, no sound like
Mm.
Finland. And with this, I try to relate. Also, I'm just because I'm a huge fan for death metal in general, so I'm trying to relate sounds because misery, mortification always had like a little. So how do you put it? Like a little sound that is just did this kind of music is just did in Australia. Now with a lot of bands playing in Australia with more releases, did you think at the beginning of the era of the death metal in Australia Was it a sound that at that moment, as a personal sound that you said this is death metal from Australia?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, for us being in Australia, I suppose a lot of our peers are like, what was happening in Europe and US and well, in a lot of other different like random countries around the world too. I mean, like being involved in that underground tape trading scene back then, I was like had trading with people all over the world. From Sweden to Japan to Germany to the US to South America, like all over the shop. So you would pick up um, trading different bands from different places too. So I suppose there's like you've got a massive international influence on what was coming through to us because I'm playing this stuff to the guys all the time and going fucking check this out, check this out, check this out. There's always like new sounds coming through that are going to influence and to sort of like pick parts of and whatever else it might be. But yeah, to answer your question, I think there was something very, very much like with the bands from Australia at that time in the 90s too that was different to everywhere else in the world. Even though, as I said, the world was our influence, we just somehow came up with our own thing, our own sound, our own scene. It was a really, really good scene in the 90s, like it was fucking so many good bands and so many great times. It was the beginning of like international starting to come over and tour as well. And before that we were just doing it ourselves, and entertaining each other and supporting each other. But yeah, it's a yeah. Look, I think the Australian metal scene has always been pretty strong and yeah, definitely has got its own thing going on.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. As I said, one of the last questions for this interview, and as well, we're talking a topic that changed the perspective or understand the metal world. While it is the social networks now, as you know,
Mm,
today, thanks to this media, metal became more understandable and comprehensible, and even lost the sense of impact, fear of mystery that it had during the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I know that you remember this when you read some lyrics on where you saw the cover arts from King Diamond, demons, vampires, and you think that the King Diamond live in a castle with that demons. All people know that because there's a mystery for us at that moment. Or when you or when you saw or when you hear the name Brujeria from US and you said that they and you think that they people, hey, they are narco satanic people. That's a curious thing. And in the 90s, everyone's believed that at that moment. But now, or also the burning churches in Norway, they people is satanic, this kind of stuff, and all people thinks that at that moment satanic, narco satanic people, they live in the castles, this kind of stuff. Now there's no mystery or curiosity that metal gave you on general level. What is your point of view about this move away of the metal has at that moment, or the metal had at that moment, and move away from the fear, mystery, curiosity, and now everything is more comprehensible thanks to
mm,
this social media.
yeah. Um, Look, I'm gonna say pros and cons in this situation. I think with yeah, like you said, back in the day, I mean, like fuck, I walked into the record store and bought the first Bathory album, for example, and you look at that and you're just like, wow. I mean, there was a guy who was completely shrouded in mystery, and the things I would conjure up in my head about Hawthorne and just like, wow, I was a massive Bathory fan, especially for like, the first four albums. And and with a lot of artists around there too, like yeah, Merciful Fate, King Diamond, and so on and so forth. So if that was now and they were releasing their stuff now and it would have been all over socials, you would see that side of it still, but you'd also like probably be friends with said person on socials and you'd see them with their family and doing cheesy shit in the backyard and silly stuff with their mates and whatever else is going on, behind the scenes in the recording studio and fucking whatever else too. So yeah, it has taken some of the mystery outside of it too. But it's also like good in the way that it's sort of humanized it a little bit more too. Like I like to think that people while they might, still sort of look up to certain bands as their peers and really like the bands and everything else too, they can just see that we're like regular people, just like they are. And I like say to people like, "Oh, wow, I love your band and everything else too." And I'm like, "Man, I'm just another dude like you. I just happen to be up on stage and I'm screaming at you. It could be you screaming at me, like whatever. We're both here for the same reasons, It's like it's just fucking cool." So yeah, look, the other thing, of course, too, is that like with the socials and it's definitely helped with the reach for artists like us. Like back in the day for our early releases, we were just relying on flyers in the mail. And if you happen to have an international label on board or someone doing your distribution overseas, great. If you don't, there's no way someone in another country is going to ever, ever, ever hear of you. Yeah, it's ridiculously prolific now, but I think it has definitely helped. Even though it's saturated, it's definitely helped bands a lot in reaching new fans that they probably never would have been able to if it wasn't for it. So yeah.
Mm. Okay, okay. Well, Simon, we come to the sad moment of this interview. I hope you enjoyed this interview as I did, and thank you very much for your time. This Sins of the Father is a great album. We put a great score on our web. So maybe you
Awesome.
have
Thank you.
something. Maybe have you something to add to your Latin fans and obviously Metalerium followers.
Just yeah, I suppose thank you so much for your well, personally for your support and for getting us on the show too. Yeah, but for yeah, for the fans from there that still reach out to us from all those years ago. Like I've had people writing to me, good old snail mail writing from years ago, and then still messaging us today, like oh man, I heard you guys this many years ago, and tell their stories and things like that too. So yeah, so from us all the way down in the armpit of the world in Australia. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it.